postage stamp up here, that's not overlooking the temple, and that's not obscuring the view from, believe me, that's, you go to the St. Anne's monastery or the, seminary, and that's what they tell you. Antonia was right here, folks. The Romans were playing dice here on this pavement. No, it's not possible. Eutychus, 876 AD, a Christian Arab church leader, citing discussions between Caliph Omar and Bishop Sophronius earlier, a couple hundred years earlier. This is in F.E. Peter's Jerusalem. Eutychus indicated that neither the Romans nor the Byzantines built any structures on the site of the temple. And at the Gihon Springs, the only thing you will see are remains of the first temple. No second temple stones. The great Jewish, once again, Rabbi commentator Kinti, temple is still in ruins. The temple site was never built on by the nations. Our holy site not been transformed into a house of prayer, no Arab would pitch his tent. This is remarkable. 1577. 900 years. Almost 900 years after the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque were built. So we've covered these three items. So what? Well, I believe the correct information about the temple will be part of the restitution of all things. This must occur before Christ returns. Some people think the restitution is going to happen after Christ returns. But read what it says in Acts 3:20 and 21. And he shall send Jesus Christ which before was preached unto you, whom the heavens will receive until the times of the restitution of all things. Then Jesus will come, which God has spoken of by the mouth of all his prophets since the world began. The temple could be built quickly if the Haram is not the site. I've had Arabs tell me that. Arab Christians tell me that. One guy who was related to the Saudi royal family, he's obviously not in favor at this time, but this guy said, the Arabs will help you rebuild the temple if you just quit claim to the Haram al-Sharif. And I believe they will. And I want to remind you again that Camp David Summit broke up over the issue of the temple. Now, I have no doubt that the Muslims, the Palestinians, and the Arabs may fight over something else if they resolve the temple problem, because they're all Abraham's children except those of Lot, and they squabble amongst themselves. The true temple site helps locate Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection, and the ascension sites, all of which are on the Mount of Olives. Now, consider this. Remember, the temple faces east. Jesus died, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, so that not like two groups of guys were pulling it from the bottom. And the earth did quake, and the rocks were rent, and the graves opened. When the centurion and they that were with him, watching Jesus, saw the earthquake and those things that were done, the veil and the temple, and the Talmud says at an earthquake about that same time, the lintel of the temple was broken, and that's probably why the veil was rent in two, and furthermore, the Sanhedrin was ruined so that they never had a judgment house. They had to have it on the Mount of Olives next time. From then on until the temple was destroyed, they never fixed it after Jesus was judged. And remember, there was another earthquake at the resurrection. Two big earthquakes. Those things were done, and so much so, saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly. And the centurion and the others said, especially the centurion, said, truly this was the Son of God. This is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Dr. Martin put this all together. I typeset this one too. In The Secrets of Golgotha, the lost history of Jesus' crucifixion. He mentions me in the acknowledgments of that. And in 1996, that's still available for sale. I didn't bring any. But you have to, when you read this book, you have to imagine Dr. Martin, when he wrote this second edition, he was in the middle of the research and not had changed over that the temple was actually to the south. because there's a whole series of issues about a Sabbath day's journey when they went from the ascension to the upper room, it says in Acts. So the true temple site also helps you locate King David's tomb. Check out this verse. Once the correct location of the temple is known, it's possible to locate King David's tomb. The body is still in there. You don't believe me? I've written an article on it, and let's look at the evidence. Men, brethren, let me freely speak unto you. This is on Pentecost. First sermon. Let me speak unto you freely of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us to this day. Then in verse 34, for David has not ascended into the heavens. That body is still in there. According to Peter, and according to Rabbi Akiva, he makes reference, and it's in my article, and I also have a presentation, and maybe I'll get invited next year, to talk about King David's tomb, because it's not possible. They would have found King David's tomb if they're digging where they're digging on the south of the Haram. David has not ascended into the heavens, but he said, by the way, that raises some interesting theological questions, but he said himself, David said about Jesus, about the Christ, the Lord said unto my Lord, Yahweh talking about Jesus before his born to Mary, sit you on my right hand until I make your foes your footstool. Read all of Acts chapter 2 in regard to David. And he, it's just stunning. Conclusions. Jesus' statement of no stone upon another is still true today. The Al-Aqsa compound is Fort Antonia. Jewish temples were above the Gihon Spring, and the multitude of sources, mostly Jewish, from 250 BC to 1577 AD, attest that the Jewish temples were above the Gihon Springs. I talked to one archaeologist who knew about this topic. I don't want to name him, still alive. He told me that they found Roman toilets dated pre-70 AD on the Haram Sharif. And, how did that happen? The Jews would have cleaned all that out, especially if that was the Temple Mount. But of course he got that information from the Palestinians. But the archaeologist told me, but nobody has published that information. I wonder why. And anyway. So Dr. Martin's book is available. We have a few here. Debbie has a few. Dr. Martin said, my research shows, this is copyright 2000, that the temples of God in Jerusalem were indeed located over the Gihon Spring and not over the Dome of the Rock. So to remind you, Fort Antonia, Temple Mount, Gihon Spring, and Dr. Martin's illustration, remind you one more time, askelm.com, and thank you very much.